under the relentless downpour of a Detroit midnight. The narrow alley behind the worn-down buildings of the South Side glistened with puddles and broken glass. Lana Bennett, a 25-year-old woman with tangled blonde hair and eyes the color of winter skies, pushed her rusted recycling cart through the slick back streets. Her faded hoodie clung to her rain-soaked frame, and every step in her threadbare canvas shoes made a soft, squelching sound. The wheels of her cart creaked and skipped as it bumped over the uneven concrete. She knew this alley by heart. Had passed through it 100 times collecting bottles, cans, and anything that could be turned into a meal. But tonight felt different. As she rounded a corner, the weak beam of a flickering street lamp caught something ahead. Lana jerked the handlebars to a stop so abruptly her cart nearly toppled. "Oh my God! Who's that?" she gasped, her breath catching in her throat. There, crumpled in a heap between torn garbage bags and soggy cardboard, lay a man. He was sprawled awkwardly on his side, the rain soaking through his clothes, his chest barely rising and falling. His tailored suit, though ripped and stained, spoke of a world far from this alley. She couldn't see his face clearly, but what she did see made her pulse quicken. Lana hesitated, her heart pounding against her ribs. She took a tentative step forward. Then another. "Hey, sir. Are you okay?" Her voice trembled as she knelt beside him. She reached out and gently touched his shoulder. "Can you hear me?" she asked. A little louder this time, giving him a light shake. The man groaned, but his eyes remained closed. He mumbled something incoherent, a slurry of words that could have been another language or just drunken nonsense. A sharp, expensive scent hit her nose, and she pulled back slightly, wrinkling it. "Whiskey," she muttered to herself. "Expensive whiskey." She hovered there, uncertain. Was this a trap? She had heard stories of women lured in by a helpless act, only to be robbed or worse. Her eyes darted around the alley, but there was nothing but shifting shadows and the faint, distant echo of music from a nearby bar. No one was watching. Then, her gaze fell back to the man's forehead. Blood, dark and sticky, was mixing with the rainwater, trickling down his temple. "He's bleeding," she whispered, leaning closer. His face was handsome, though bruised and pale, too pale. His jawline was strong, his lips slightly parted. Dark brown hair was matted to his forehead, soaked through. "If I leave him here, he could die," she thought. The idea stabbed at her conscience, tightening her chest. Her grandfather's voice echoed from a distant memory, even in the mud. "Some lives are worth pulling out." She swallowed hard. "Damn it," she muttered. Then pulled the cart closer, grabbing the man under his arms. She heaved. He was heavier than he looked. Her back ached instantly, her wrists screaming in protest. But she refused to give up. Each tug sent shocks of pain through her tired muscles, her knees slipping on the wet pavement. "Just get him on. Just don't die on me," she breathed. Half to him, half to herself. With one final, desperate grunt, she managed to haul him into the cart, laying him between bags of aluminum cans and plastic bottles. His head lolled to the side. Without a second thought, She pulled off her own hoodie and bundled it up beneath his head, shielding him from the cold metal frame. She stepped back, panting, soaked to the bone, watching the rain stream down his unconscious face. That's when her eyes caught something. The collar of his shirt had shifted. She bent down and gently pulled it aside. There, etched into the skin just above his heart, was a tattoo, a detailed crest featuring a golden eagle and Latin words she couldn't read. It was clean, sharp, professionally done, not something a common street drunk would have. A family seal? Corporate? Military? What are you? She asked the empty air. But he offered no answer. The sound of thunder rolled across the sky as Lana climbed onto her bike and began to pedal. The cart wobbled, heavier than ever before. The man groaned with every bump in the road. But he did not wake. Water sprayed from the wheels as she pushed forward, her legs shaking from effort and fear. She didn't know who he was or what trouble he was in. But she knew one thing for certain: she couldn't let him die in the garbage. Not tonight. Lana pushed the cart until her bike finally gave out just outside her shack. A makeshift shelter barely standing on the edge of Detroit's slums. Built from rotting planks and covered with a sagging blue tarp. It was all she had. Rain still whispered down, tapping against the plastic like a fading heartbeat. She unlatched the rickety door and shoved it open. The air inside smelled of mildew and damp earth. Lighting a small candle stub in the corner, she carefully dragged the unconscious man from the cart and onto her only mattress. A stained piece of foam on the floor. Kneeling beside him, her hands shaking, she peeled off his soaked shoes. Then carefully removed his jacket and shirt. His forehead was crusted with dried blood. She wiped it away gently with a damp cloth, biting her lip in concentration. That's when she noticed the watch on his wrist. It was gold. Sleek. And impossibly expensive. Its soft gleam catching in the candlelight. Even his torn suit screamed wealth. The stitching, the texture of the fabric, definitely came from money. She whispered. She covered him with her only other blanket, a thin coverlet full of holes, and sat beside him, watching the shallow rise and fall of his chest until sleep finally stole over her. Curled up on the cold floor nearby. By morning, the rain had stopped. Pale light filtered through the tarp roof. Lana stirred first, her body aching from the hard concrete. Her eyes snapped open, immediately finding him. He was still there. But he was shifting slightly. His brow furrowed. Then, his eyes opened. Where am I? He rasped, his voice raw. Lana sat up. You're safe, she said softly. I found you unconscious in the rain. You're in my place. He tried to sit up but winced, gripping his head. I don't remember anything. He looked at her, his eyes wide with confusion. Who am I? You don't even remember your name. He shook his head slowly. Nothing. It's blank. Lana studied his face, searching for any sign of deception, but saw only genuine fear. All right, she said gently. Until you remember. I'll call you James. It's from a book I liked as a kid. He blinked, then gave a small nod. James. Okay. You're lucky to be alive, she continued. You had a bad cut on your head. And you smelled like a bar floor. I'm sorry. He muttered. I don't know who I was. But maybe that's not a bad thing. Lana stretched, her joints popping. Hungry? I think so. She moved to a small burner in the corner, cracked 2 precious eggs into a dented pan, and toasted some dry bread over the open flame. Minutes later, she handed him a chipped plate. James stared at the simple meal as if it were a treasure. You didn't have to help me, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You didn't even know me. I couldn't just leave you there. She replied simply. He took a bite and closed his eyes. This is the best thing I've ever eaten. You must not get many home-cooked meals. She joked. He laughed quietly. A warm sound that filled the small space. Then looked around. This place. It's small. But it's peaceful. They ate in a comfortable silence. Afterward, James slowly stood, still wincing. He hobbled toward the creaky door and jiggled the loose hinge. This thing's falling apart, he observed. I know. Meant to fix it. Mind if I try? Be my guest, she said, surprised. He picked up an old screwdriver from a crate, crouched down, and went to work. His hands, though bruised, were steady and sure. Within minutes, the door swung more smoothly and quietly than it had in years. You fixed it, Lana said, stunned. It wasn't hard, he replied with a small, proud smile. Needed something to do. She stared at him, a strange warmth spreading through her chest. Thank you, she whispered. He just shrugged. You saved my life. Fixing a door seems fair. And in that quiet moment, Lana didn't see a stranger from a world she'd never touch. She saw a mankind, gentle, and quietly extraordinary. A week passed. James had stayed, and each day fell into a gentle rhythm. They'd wake to the early morning light peeking through the tarp, the soft rustle of Lana moving around their tiny shack, and the scent of rain still lingering in the air. He never asked for more than what she gave him: food, shelter, and quiet company. In return, he offered what help he could. By the 3rd day, he insisted on going with her. You saved me, he had said, his voice firm. Let me help you now. And so, they moved together each morning through the alleys of Detroit, pushing the old cart with its wobbly wheel and half-broken handle. James learned quickly how to separate the recyclables: aluminum cans here, plastic there, cardboard flattened neatly in piles. He got his hands dirty without a single complaint, even cracking jokes that, to his surprise, made Lana laugh. A real, genuine laugh. Not the polite chuckle she sometimes gave strangers. You're not half bad at this, she told him once, grinning as he struggled to balance a teetering stack of bottles. I should put it on my resume, he replied, mock serious. Specialist in urban waste management. 5 stars. One afternoon, they took a break under the wide, sheltering branches of an old maple tree near the edge of the scrapyard. Lana unpacked their modest lunch: a couple of hard-boiled eggs, a handful of crackers, and a bruised apple. which she split between them. James bit into his half of the apple and leaned back against the tree, staring up at the sky. You ever think about what you'd be doing if life had turned out different? She asked, peeling her egg slowly. James glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. I do. But it's all blank. It's like there's a wall in my head. And behind it, there are just shadows. Shapes. I keep seeing glimpses of things. A boardroom. Maybe. Men in suits. Papers on a table. Arguments. Pressure. But nothing clear. Lana nodded. Then hesitated. I used to want to be a fashion designer. You? James asked. Genuinely surprised. She smirked. Why not? No. I mean. Yes. I can see it. You have that spark. I loved sketching dresses when I was a kid, she said softly, her voice wistful. I used to stay at the public library for hours, reading magazines I could never afford. But then my mom died, and I had to take care of my little brother. School. Dreams. All of that just stopped. James watched her. Something tender and admiring in his gaze. She wasn't just strong. She was full of dreams she had never stopped carrying. Even if she did so in silence. Your brother. Where is he now? Foster care. She said quietly, her eyes on the ground. I couldn't keep up. He was just a kid. I still send letters. But I don't know if they ever reach him. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of their unspoken histories settling gently between them. James picked up a small piece of metal near his futon, old flat bottle cap, twisted at the edge. He turned it over and over in his fingers. An idea forming in his mind. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of orange and rose, James sat beside the cart. With a small nail and a rock, he began to carve. Slowly and carefully. When Lana came out to see what he was doing, he turned to her and smiled. Look, he said, holding it up. She stepped closer. In the metal, scuffed but clearly etched, was a name, Lana. For the cart, he said softly. So no one forgets who really runs this operation. She stared at the little piece of metal. Then at him. Her heart beating faster. No one had ever done something so small. So seemingly meaningless. But to her, it meant the world. Why would you do this? She asked. Her voice barely a whisper. He reached for her hand, gently curling his fingers around hers. His voice was steady, but soft, as if the words cost him something. Because I don't know who I was, he said, his eyes meeting hers. But I know one thing. I want to stay here. With you. She looked into his eyes. Those striking blue eyes that no longer looked lost. They looked like they had found something. Their lips met in a kiss that was not perfect or practiced. It was hesitant. Human. And real, the kind of kiss born not from romance, but from recognition. James pulled away first, his forehead resting against hers. Lana closed her eyes. In that moment, under the dying light of day, surrounded by the quiet hum of their world, It felt like nothing else mattered. But deep inside, as James sat beside her, a faint throb returned behind his temples. Flashes again, sharp suits. A building lobby. A voice shouting numbers. He blinked them away, clinging to the warmth of her hand. Lana felt it, too. Not the memory, but the fear. What if he remembered? What if everything, this life, this peace, this love was just borrowed time? She did not let go of his hand. Not yet. Not tonight. Rain tapped gently against the blue tarp roof. A soft, steady rhythm in the silence of the night. A cool wind slipped through the cracks of the wooden walls, making the candle flame on the shelf flicker faintly. Inside the tiny shack, Lana lay curled beneath a warm blanket, her breathing slow and even. Beside her, James lay still, his eyes closed. But his mind was far from rest. He was dreaming. The images came in sharp, violent flashes, a glass table. Voices raised in anger. You're gambling with everything we built, Ethan. A fist slamming down. The dizzying rush of anger. A door slamming shut. A bar. The sting of alcohol. The blur of city lights. Then, footsteps behind him in a dark alley. A sudden, blinding blow to the head. James woke with a sharp gasp, his chest rising and falling rapidly. His forehead was slick with sweat. The dream wasn't a dream. It was a memory. He sat up slowly, his heart hammering, and looked around the shack. The makeshift shelves, the flickering candle, and Lana, sleeping peacefully on the mattress. She had no idea her world was about to shatter. James. No. Ethan. His name was Ethan Caldwell. CEO of Caldwell Enterprises. Billionaire. And, until this moment, missing. He pressed a hand to his temple as it all came rushing back at once. The endless meetings. The suffocating contracts. The blinding media flashes. The crushing pressure. Then, Michael Reed. The betrayal. The argument. The attack. And now, this. He looked at Lana again, her face calm and peaceful in sleep. She had saved him without asking a single question. She gave him food, shelter, and a kindness he hadn't known he was starving for. She had given him a reason to want to be a better man. And now he remembered everything. Ethan crossed the small room quietly and sat at the crate that served as their table. He found a pencil stub and a scrap of notebook paper. With trembling hands, he began to write. Lana. I remember now. My name is Ethan Caldwell. I am the CEO of Caldwell Enterprises. I was attacked after an argument with someone I once trusted. I never meant to deceive you. When I woke up here with nothing, you gave me everything. You reminded me what it feels like to be truly seen. But I have to go back. There are people to face. Things to make right. I don't know what's ahead. But one thing is certain. I love you. If you can still believe in us, please, wait for me. I will return. James, Ethan. He folded the note carefully and placed it beside her on the mattress. Then, quietly, He removed the gold watch from his wrist, the one piece of his old life he had unconsciously kept, and left it beside the letter. He stood there for a long time, just watching her sleep, fighting the overwhelming urge to wake her, to try and explain everything face to face. But he knew it would only make leaving harder. And this was something he had to do alone. As the first light of dawn slipped through the cracks in the walls, Ethan stepped outside. The rain had stopped. The city beyond the slums was slowly, indifferently, waking up. Without looking back, he walked away. Hours later, Lana stirred. Her hand reached out beside her, searching for a familiar warmth that wasn't there. "James," she whispered, her eyes still half closed. No answer. She sat up, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. Her heart sank the moment she saw the folded paper on the mattress. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded it. Her eyes moved quickly down the page. Once. Then again. Then a third time. The words blurring through her tears. He was someone else. A name. A title. A man from a world so impossibly far from hers it might as well have been another planet. And he had left. Just like that. She clutched the letter to her chest. Her body racked with sobs. Unsure what hurt more, the truth he had hidden, or the love he had taken with him. 2 months had passed since the morning Lana woke to find Ethan gone. The days blurred together in a haze of monotonous work, pushing her cart, sorting through trash, scraping by on the coins she earned, and falling asleep on the same thin mattress. Now feeling emptier than ever. Her face, once soft with a quiet warmth, now carried a hardened stillness. She moved with purpose but not with life. Her eyes no longer met those of strangers. Her voice had grown quiet, almost cold. She told herself it was better this way. He had never truly belonged to her world. He was a billionaire CEO. But every night, she still dreamed of a man named James. And every morning, she remembered he was gone. It was during one of her morning routes that she stopped outside a pawn shop. An old television in the window flickered with static. She almost kept walking. But then a name caught her ear. Ethan Caldwell has officially returned to the public eye following a 2-month medical leave. Sources confirmed the CEO is leading a major restructuring of Caldwell Enterprises. Lana froze. The screen showed him wearing a perfectly tailored suit, his hair slicked back, standing behind a podium emblazoned with a corporate logo. He looked confident, composed, powerful, like someone who had never stepped foot in a muddy alley or fixed a broken door. So, it was all real. He was the Ethan Caldwell, a billionaire. And she had believed that what they shared was genuine, that it had meant something. Now, it all felt like a cruel experiment. An adventure for a rich man playing at slum life. A little charity and love to feel something real before returning to his throne. She turned away before the news segment ended, her hands trembling with a cold, quiet anger. Meanwhile, in his towering glass office overlooking Detroit, Ethan sat staring out at the city. The meetings blurred together, contracts, lawsuits, reporters. His world was back. But it felt like a suit that no longer fit. He thought constantly of her. Lana. He had written the letter, had meant every word. But fear held him back. Fear that she would hate him for what he hadn't said. Fear that she wouldn't forgive him. Across the polished table. His partner, Michael Reed, watched him with quiet satisfaction. During Ethan's absence, Michael had shifted influence, wooed the board, and slowly angled for control. Now that Ethan was back, he worked subtly, persistently, to undermine him. You seem distracted, Ethan, Michael said one morning, a false note of concern in his voice. Are you sure you're ready to be back in charge? I'm exactly where I need to be, Ethan replied, though the words felt hollow. That night, alone in his sterile penthouse apartment, he made a decision. He had to see her. The next afternoon, a sleek black town car pulled up near the edge of the slums. The streets hadn't changed, they were still loud, cracked, and unapologetically real. He found her by the recycling depot, dragging a heavy bag of cans toward her cart. Her hair was pulled back in a braid. Her clothes were layered and worn, the same as always. But she stood straighter now. Colder. Lana, he said, stepping out of the car. She turned slowly, her expression hardening into a mask of stone. I'm not buying anything, she said flatly. I'm not selling, he replied gently. I came to offer you something. A job. She raised a skeptical eyebrow. As my executive assistant, he added. At Caldwell Enterprises. She stared at him for a long, silent moment, weighing his offer. Then, a flicker of resolve crossed her face. Fine, she said. I'll take it. But let's get one thing straight. He waited, his heart in his throat. I'll do the job. I'll do it well. But this, she gestured between the two of them, is just business. Don't ever bring up the past. He nodded, a pang of regret hitting him. Understood. Before she turned away, he called over a nearby boy and handed him a sealed envelope. Please take this to the woman in that shack, he instructed, pointing. That evening, when Lana returned home, she found a small basket by her door. Inside was rice, fresh fruit, canned soup, a bar of chocolate, and a simple note, for the hard days. From the man who owes you everything. Caldwell Enterprises stood like a monument of glass and steel in downtown Detroit. Its lobby was a polished expanse of marble and hushed echoes. The soft tapping of expensive leather shoes the only sound. Lana stepped through the revolving doors with her head held high. Even though she felt entirely out of place in her second-hand blouse and worn-out flats. Her first day as an administrative assistant was overwhelming. But by the end of the first week, whispers were already circling about the new hire. How fast she learned. How meticulously she organized the executive schedules. How her reports were always, without exception, error-free. I heard she used to live in a shack. One assistant murmured behind a copy room door. No way. Lana ignored the gossip. She worked with a quiet, focused efficiency. Never speaking more than necessary. Never lingering near Ethan's office unless it was strictly business. She addressed him only as Mr. Caldwell. And he, respecting her wishes, did the same. But every now and then, their eyes would meet across a long conference table. And for a fleeting second, an entire unspoken history would pass between them. Michael Reed noticed it, too. He watched Ethan closely in meetings. Saw the flicker of hesitation when Lana spoke. The way Ethan's stern expression would soften almost imperceptibly. It was a weakness. A dangerous one. And Michael had no intention of letting it ruin the power he had so carefully built while Ethan was gone. At first, Michael tried subtle sabotage. He intercepted emails meant for Ethan. He accidentally reassigned Lana to tedious, dead-end projects. But nothing broke her. She kept delivering results. Her competence shining through. So, he escalated. Michael had always been cunning. He approached a disgruntled IT technician and orchestrated a scheme. Using Lana's workstation credentials, he had someone send confidential project files to a rival company. He planted a fabricated email chain, creating a false trail that showed communication between Lana and a competitor's executive. The pieces clicked together like clockwork. He just needed ethane, or more accurately, the board to believe it. By the end of the month, the pressure was mounting. Rumors of a corporate leak began to circulate. One morning, Ethan called Lana into his office. He looked tired, worn down. There was a file on his desk with her name on it. "I need to ask you something," he said carefully. Lana nodded, bracing herself. "Have you been in contact with anyone from Redwell Industries?" "No," she answered instantly, her gaze unwavering. "Why?" "Some emails surfaced this morning. From your account." She stared at him, her heart pounding. "They're fake. I didn't send anything." He believed her. She could see it in his eyes. But she could also see that outside the walls of this office, the trap was closing in. A few days later, an emergency board meeting was called. Ethan walked into the glass-walled room to find the full board present, with Michael standing at the head of the table. A smug, self-satisfied smile on his face. A large file rested on the table, marked, "Internal Security Breach, Evidence Packet." "We have a problem," Michael began, his voice grave. "A serious one." He presented the forged documents, the email logs, the screenshots, a meticulously crafted timeline that made it all look devastatingly real. He spoke with poise, with the air of someone reluctantly forced to deliver bad news. "Miss Bennett," Michael said, his eyes scanning the room, "has been passing proprietary information to our competitors. And while I understand she had a previous relationship with Mr. Caldwell, we must consider whether this connection has compromised his judgment." Ethan stood abruptly. "This is a setup." Michael kept his cool. "That's for the board to decide." The vote was swift and brutal, effective immediately. Ethan was asked to step aside during the investigation. Lana was to be dismissed. Security met her at her desk 10 minutes later. Lana did not cry. She packed her few personal belongings in silence. As she passed through the gleaming marble lobby, the whispers returned. Louder now. Scandal. Betrayal. Favoritism. She kept her chin up and her eyes forward, her chest tight with a cold fury. Outside the building, the gray sky threatened rain. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a single, anonymous message. "I believe you. Do not give up. We will uncover the truth. She closed her eyes, let out a slow breath, and kept walking. The old warehouse sat like a rusted skeleton on the industrial outskirts of Detroit, its frame groaning with every gust of wind. Broken windows stared out like hollow eyes, and the air inside was thick with the smell of dust and decay. Lana stepped through a side entrance just before dusk, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her face set in stone. She had received the call earlier that morning. If you want your little IT friend to stay alive, bring the files, the distorted voice had said. Alone. No police. The voice didn't know that it was already too late. 2 days earlier, a young IT technician named Lisa, who had once worked closely with Michael, had reached out to Lana in secret. Lisa had always suspected Michael of foul play, but fear had kept her quiet. Until now. I saved a copy of the admin logs, she had whispered over coffee in a noisy diner, her hands trembling as she slid a flash drive across the table. Emails, server access records, even an audio file. He was bragging to someone about what he did to frame you and push Ethan out. Lana had taken the files and gone straight to the police. They promised to move quietly, to build an airtight case. But when Lisa failed to show up for their next meeting, Lana knew Michael had found her. Now, standing inside the cavernous warehouse, Lana scanned the shadows until she saw them. Lisa was tied to a chair, a dark bruise forming beneath her eye. Michael stood nearby in a pressed gray suit, looking absurdly out of place in the rotting building. Beside him was a large, brutish man, one of Michael's private security goons. Didn't think you'd actually show, Michael said with a smirk. I want Lisa, Lana replied, her voice steady. Let her go. Hand over the flash drive first. She pulled it from her pocket and held it up. This is what you want, right? Everything you tried to bury. He took a step closer, his eyes gleaming with greed. You're smarter than I thought. Too bad you got involved in something you couldn't control. As he reached for the drive, Lana's voice cut through the tension, sharp and clear. It's a copy. Michael froze. The original is already with the police, she continued, her confidence growing. They're on their way right now. His face twisted into a mask of pure fury. You little, he spun around, shouting at his henchmen. Burn it all. Get rid of the backups now. But the screech of sirens cut through the air just as the man reached for a nearby computer terminal. Red and blue lights flooded the broken windows as police cars swarmed the building. Officers stormed in from every side, shouting commands. In the chaos, Michael made a desperate move, lunging to grab Lisa as a hostage. Lana lunged forward to stop him, but Michael pulled a small blade from his coat, his eyes wild with desperation. That was when Ethan appeared. He burst through the side door, his eyes locked on Lana. He didn't hesitate. As Michael turned the blade toward her, Ethan threw himself in front of her, shielding her with his own body. The knife grazed his shoulder, tearing through fabric and flesh. He stumbled but stayed upright as officers tackled Michael to the ground. The henchman surrendered without a fight. Lisa was pulled safely from her chair, shaking but alive. Lana dropped to her knees beside Ethan. His face was pale, his hand clutching the wound. But he managed a small, pained smile. Still think I'm not good at showing up when it matters? He whispered. She let out a shaky laugh that was half a sob. You're an idiot. Yeah. He said. His voice thin. But I'm your idiot. Her hands pressed against his wound, trying to stop the bleeding. But her eyes searched his desperately. Why would you do that? Ethan reached up, his fingers gently brushing her cheek. Because no matter who I was, or who I'll be, the only thing that hasn't changed is how I feel about you. His voice trembled, but the words were clear and true. I love you, Lana. Tears spilled down her face. She leaned in and kissed him a soft, trembling kiss, full of terror and relief. Outside, as the police secured the area and a defeated Michael was loaded into a cruiser, the last rays of sunset poured through the broken roof. And inside, amid the ruins of a failed betrayal, something whole and beautiful began to heal. The sun dipped low behind the skyscrapers of Detroit, casting long, golden streaks across the rooftop garden of Caldwell Enterprises. A warm breeze danced across the terrace, tugging gently at Ethan's tie as he stood facing a sea of reporters and flashing cameras. It had been 1 week since Michael Reed's arrest. 1 week since the truth had come out in a spectacular public fashion. And today, Ethan Caldwell had been officially reinstated as CEO. But he was not here to reclaim a throne. I want to thank everyone for their patience. He began, his voice steady and calm. It's been a challenging few months. We've uncovered deception, survived betrayal, and we have come out stronger. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the crowd until it found Lana, who stood just beyond the cameras, watching with quiet, hopeful eyes. But today, he continued, I'm not here to talk about quarterly reports or market projections. I'm here to talk about purpose. Because success without humanity means nothing. I was once a man who had everything. Yet I felt nothing. He took a deep breath. Until a woman who had nothing gave me everything. A ripple of gasps and murmurs went through the crowd. Ethan let the silence settle before continuing. She found me in the rain, broken and forgotten. She didn't know my name. And she didn't care. She cared that I was cold. She cared that I was bleeding. She saved meant just my life. But my soul. That is the kind of leadership this company needs. That is the kind of compassion this world needs. He stepped back from the podium, his decision firm. Therefore, I am stepping down as CEO of Caldwell Enterprises. Effective immediately. I will remain involved on the board. But from now on, this company will be guided by a new initiative focused on community reinvestment and ethical business. A program to be led by people who remember what it truly means to feel. He left the stage before the murmurs could turn into a roar of questions. His path already set. On the private rooftop above, the light was softer, quieter. Lana waited by the edge, looking out over the city she had always known from the ground up. She heard his footsteps behind her and turned. He joined her silently, handing her a small, velvet-covered box. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a single, elegant charm engraved with tiny, cursive letters, "With you always." She closed her fingers around it, her lips trembling. "I'm sorry I left," Ethan said gently. "I was afraid." Not of losing my company, but of not being worthy of you. Lana's voice was a whisper. You didn't have to be perfect, Ethan. You just had to be honest. I am now, he said, stepping closer. I love you. I loved you in a shack. I loved you in a boardroom. And I loved you in the silence between. All I want to know is. He reached for her hand. His touch both a question and a promise. Do you still have enough courage left to love me again? Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. I never stopped. She leaned into him. And they embraced beneath the burning sky. A quiet promise passing between them. 1 year later. The storefront sign flickered to life. It's warm. Inviting glow spilling onto the newly paved sidewalk, second chances, books and coffee. Inside. The scent of fresh coffee. Old paper. And new beginnings mingled in the air. Shelves filled with books. Both new and used. Lined the walls. In a cozy corner. A group of kids from a local shelter sat listening as a young man with a bright, hopeful smile read a story aloud. It was Lana's brother. Home from the foster care system and now living with her. His tuition for community college paid for by an anonymous benefactor. Lana stood behind the counter. A soft smile on her face as she poured a coffee. She wore a simple apron over her jeans. Her hair tied back. Her eyes shining with a light that had been missing for so long. The bell over the door chimed. And Ethan walked in. He wasn't wearing a suit, but a simple pair of jeans and a comfortable sweater. He carried a small, lopsided cake with a single candle. For the 1-year anniversary of the best business decision I ever made, he said, setting the cake on the counter. She laughed. A sound that was full and happy. I thought your best business decision was stepping down. That was my second best. He corrected, leaning in to kiss her. It was a kiss that spoke of shared mornings, quiet evenings, and a love that had been tested by fire and found to be real. They were not a fairy tale. They were two people who had found each other in the garbage of their old lives and built something beautiful from the pieces. They had a small apartment above the bookstore. A life filled with simple joys. And a future that felt, for the first time for both of them, completely and utterly their own. They were exactly where they belonged. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of love, loss, and redemption. The story of Lana and Ethan reminds us that even in the darkest corners of life, hope can bloom and love can find its way. If this story touched your heart, made you feel something deep inside, or reminded you that everyone deserves a second chance, please consider subscribing to Soul-Stirring Stories. We bring you powerful narratives, both real and fictional, that are designed to heal, inspire, and stay with you long after the story ends. Hit that subscribe button. Give this video a thumbs up. And share it with someone who still believes in the transformative magic of love and compassion. Until next time. Stay kind. Stay hopeful. And keep believing in soul-stirring stories.